Good morning, everybody. Welcome to We Eat Stories for Breakfast. I'm Adam
Yum.
Rossi, he, him.
I'm Chandler, also he, him.
We are very, very excited for our first episode. So if you're a Patreon subscriber, you've already heard episode 0 and didn't even saw us. But this is the first official episode of We Eat Stories for Breakfast. And how we start every episode is with the breakfast order. So since we don't have a previous guest, we're going to chat about what we had for breakfast this morning. So I had a very similar breakfast that I normally always have. So if you heard episode 0, this is very similar, but I have 2 pieces of toast. I've got 2 slices of chicken sausage and some egg. Today's chicken sausage was an apple cheddar. Very, very good. That's one of my go-tos. I like that sort of
Sounds good.
sweetness that comes with it. And the toast, I found this protein toast that is everything bagel flavored. So absolutely delicious. And then I do prefer my eggs over easy, although I will eat an egg pretty much any way you serve it to me.
I think it's important to know almost. I'm going to deviate
Almost,
a little
There are
bit.
some ways that I'm like, what are we doing? Hard boiled?
Yeah.
Get out of here. I want my egg cooked for real.
Or like this morning when I kind of messed up the way I was cooking my eggs. I'm going to deviate a little bit because my breakfast this morning, it was good. It was fine, but I'm more excited about a breakfast I have planned for this weekend. A little dating on when we're recording this, because transparency, why not?
Sure.
This coming weekend is Labor Day, and I have one of the best men in my wedding is coming to visit for the first time since I've moved out to Washington, D.C., so super excited. And he is a big fan of my family's biscuits and gravy, so biscuits with country sausage gravy. So I'm prepped to make some really so healthy. We've also got cinnamon rolls on lock ready. Probably going to scramble some eggs or make some omelets. I think we have bacon too. Ugh, I don't normally eat this much for breakfast, but I may be 10 pounds heavier.
Well, that's great. Are you coming to PAX in December?
I am.
I plan to offer omelets to everybody that first morning because I feel like I am the omelet king. So maybe we record an in-person episode that weekend.
I was going to suggest that.
And I said I made breakfast for people because I love making an omelet. There's nothing more satisfying than the perfect omelet. And I had a couple professional chefs teach me how to do it.
That's amazing. I'll bring my setup and we can record. That'd be sick.
Yes. So next episode 2, we will have a breakfast order to rank. Before we get to that and introducing her, we'll chat really quick about some stories that we've been absorbing lately. I will say 2 things. One, have you ever heard of the Amazon show My Lady Jane?
I've heard of it. I've heard that it's really good,
Chandler,
and I have yet to watch it.
Good. So the main actress in My Lady Jane was just cast as Poppy in the Emily Henry adaptation of People We Meet on Vacation. Which is, if you're not an Emily Henry reader, I don't know what you guys are doing. She's so good. But so she's going to be in that adaptation, and she was in this, My Lady Jane was a book, and it's based off of historical characters, but and the opening's very funny because it's like these people actually sucked. So let's do it, but in a better way. So there's like a lot of cool things about it. I don't think season 2 is happening, and I'm very upset about it, but it's very good. But the thing that I wanted to reference for today's episode is I have been planning to do one of my favorite TTRPGs is outside of D&D is Call of Cthulhu. I think we mentioned this in episode 0, did we?
I'm not sure if we mentioned Call of Cthulhu specifically. I personally know that you are a Call of Cthulhu fan.
I love Call of Cthulhu. I know H.P. Lovecraft is problematic, but I think art from artists is important. I'm going to read quickly the opening couple of sentences of the Call of Cthulhu chapter in the Cthulhu Mythos Tales book by H.P. Lovecraft, because it's something that I have been thinking about a lot recently in my unemployment, not knowing what I'm going to do next life right now. So this is from chapter 1, The Horror in Clay. It says, "The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all of its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far." I love the idea. First of all, the prose is beautiful, but I love the idea that the most merciful thing in the world is that we're not meant to understand everything about it. And if we were, it would overwhelm us. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that we live in the middle of this dark, dark sea of insanity. And we weren't supposed to go that far. And so it's okay what we understand and recognize, but if we don't understand everything, that's how it was supposed to be anyway. So it's okay. And I often find myself coming back to that quote a lot, as an artist and as somebody who struggles with not knowing where my next year is going to look like, right? Like my last 3 years, I think I'm famous for telling people who knows where I'll be next year. And it's held true the last 5 years. I've been in a new place every year except for one. So I think about that a lot recently, and I think that is apt for the conversation we have today.
I think I'm not sure if my story, which is it's technically a story or a collection therein of. I don't know if this will more directly relate to our conversation or if it will relate to some of my reflections on the conversation.
Sure.
This is not really a story that's going to be accessible to anybody. And I guess forewarning for this episode is a little bit of a deep moment.
Yes, very deep moment.
My story reflection is also a deep moment. I was just at a funeral yesterday for my fiance's grandmother, and my fiance's mom has 4 siblings. So in total, this grandmother who passed had 4 daughters and 1 son. And for a very beautiful moment, they each got up and told like their either most impactful story or memory or what their mom meant to them. And very true to, I guess, a lot of what my interpretation of story has been recently, all very different. They all saw their mom very differently in both positive and negative ways, and in such a way that was like very true, and that there were negative parts that only made it more like real and that only uplifted the good parts even more. And I think kind of that comparison that we talk about, like it's kind of like the red apple, the golden apple kind of helps you realize what you have. And it's just this weirdly beautiful moment, not to bring everything down, but
that was great. No, I don't think down's the wrong word for sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a ton to add, so I'm not going to force anything to add, but I love how you tie it to the red apple, the golden apple. That's like you don't appreciate what something is until it's either not there or it's different. I don't think that.
But without further ado,
yes. So we forgot our shtick from episode 0. If you're a Patreon subscriber, is that we forecast deep moments. Jeny is our guest on today's episode. She is somebody that we know from our time in Inspired R&R, which is an online D&D community. Her title is.
I had that prepped. Man, coordinator of safety and inclusion.
Yes.
Hold on. I'm going to fact check myself.
Inclusion. It might be inclusion and safety. It might be the other way around.
I will double check myself right now.
Sure.
If I can spell. I want this to
spell.
Yeah.
Geny. Jeny is our guest today. She's from Inspired R&R, which is how we know her. She's the director of safety and inclusion for that, so she's really focused on making sure people's stories get told and that they feel that they are in a safe space and able to share what they want when they want. You're looking like you either have it or you don't have it.
Yeah, it's coordinator of safety and inclusion.
Coordinator, so we were close.
I think it used to be safety and or director of safety and inclusion. Right. I don't know why it's I don't know. She's basically running the whole show over there.
Yeah, no, she's great. But we know Jeny from being a DM, being a player, and being, of course, the coordinator of safety and inclusion for this group. And so we thought she was the perfect guest for us because we both know her, but also haven't got to know her at a deep level. The story does get pretty intense at times. There is some religious trauma that's talked about. So if you feel that you are in the headspace to listen to that, please take care of yourself. But otherwise, I think it's a very, very good conversation.
It is one of the best that we've ever had on this podcast.
I agree. Without further ado, here's our interview with Jeny.
Did I have like a tagline that I said into?
I don't remember, but I don't think so. Did you say let's dig in? You can say it if you want.
I don't know. You can say it too. I don't have to have all the taglines.
All right, we have our very first guest here on We Eat Stories for Breakfast. Jeny, hi, how we doing?
I'm great. The best day of my life. How are you?
Wonderful. Oh, I'm doing great. So just really quickly, introduce yourself and tell us just a really quick, like, who you are, what you do.
So I am Jeny. I use she, her pronouns. I am a hashtag transitioned teacher. I used to be an educator, and due to, the stars aligning, and I guess there is a God somewhere who loves and cares for me because I am no longer an educator, and it's the best decision I've ever made in my life. And now I am in learning and development, and I am also, I know I don't look it, but I'm a huge nerd. Can I swear?
I think we said yes.
A huge nerd.
No, I think we're fine.
Okay.
I think we're fine.
If at worst case scenario, if we needed to, we'll just, which is so much funny.
It's way funnier.
In fact, I think we'll bleep it anyway. I think we'll just randomly bleep out whatever for comedic purposes. Actually, only you, Jeny.
Purple nerd. Beep.
I love when there's videos that you bleep and it's like you shouldn't bleep, and it's way funnier.
So, Jeny, you mentioned being a nerd, so I think I'm sure Adam and I have mentioned already in the intro how we know you, but if you want to go, I'm positive you know why we invited you on this podcast. If you want to go in a little bit in that background of yours.
I think you invited me here because I'm a writer, and that's the way you know me.
That's what I said.
Sure. So I do very much enjoy writing and reading, but the way that you know me is through D&D. I am a player and a game master, dungeon master, with Inspired and in other areas of the world. I love
both game and dungeon master for different reasons, but I do like both of them.
I also know this didn't stick, but a couple years ago, there was a trend to try and change it to game guide or dungeon guide.
No, I don't like that. No, I don't like that at all.
Just throwing that out there.
I don't. No.
Same reason we call it a primary bedroom.
Well, okay. That is a little different. I think.
Oh,
That's
I see.
a little different, but I get what you're saying.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a conversation I had that I didn't understand in a moment, so I'm glad I heard. But
we'll come back to that in the outro because there's a lot of things with that.
We'll put a pin in that.
I don't like it, and I will 100% make that change
for sure.
If need be. Yep.
Before we get into our questions that we have for every guest here on We Eat Stories for Breakfast, it is called We Eat Stories for Breakfast. So, Jeny, what is your go-to breakfast? What is your favorite breakfast, or what's the breakfast that's what you want when you have a breakfast? I don't know if you're a breakfast person.
I am. Breakfast
we will try this.
Yeah, so the idea is we are going to try everybody's favorite or go-to, and then at the top of the next episode, rank what they had. So.
Okay.
So be ready.
Typing it up right now.
Shoot, okay. I am going to type it up. Please hold.
You get a pan. All right, that's the first step. A pan, a medium-sized pan, ideally. You do a little bit of butter and olive oil, a very little bit of butter and olive oil, just so that there's there's not any part of the bottom of the pan that doesn't have butter or olive oil on it. And then you crack an egg or 2 eggs, depending on how much protein you're going for.
For sure.
You don't whip it up beforehand. You just crack an egg, and then you use a spatula to kind of and put the yolk, scramble the yolk. Then, once it has started to cook a little bit, you add whatever your favorite kind of cheese is. I'm sorry, I missed a step. When you first add in the egg, you also add in any seasonings you want. So I like to use a lot of garlic.
For sure.
I like to add in basil and Italian seasoning, and sometimes onions if I have. Or shallots are my favorite, but okay. Whatever you're feeling. Old Bay is dope. Whatever.
We're only gonna use the things you said, so because this is your breakfast.
Okay, I'm gonna go with what my favorite is then, which is just garlic and basil and Italian seasoning.
Sounds
and
amazing.
then the cheese on top, which for that I would suggest either mozzarella or sharp cheddar.
Nice. Okay, I love mozzarella.
And once the cheese is been on there for a moment or two, this is very specific. I hope you are writing this down. So
Yes,
It's
once
being
it's been
recorded,
there
actually.
for a
and
bit.
we'll add closed captions so people can follow along.
Good. So you're gonna do about, you close your eyes and you listen to what the ancestors tell you from the old country of how much garlic to put in. And it's usually like a large spoonful from a minced, like a half, just a big old, equal parts egg and garlic. Not that much. Oh my God.
Okay. I guess garlic's good for the immune system. So you're not
It
getting
is.
cold. You're not getting a cold anytime soon.
No. And then you take a tortilla and you put the tortilla on top of the cheese and you use the spatula to kind of push down on it a little bit so that the cheese kind of melts and the egg kind of cooks to the bottom of the tortilla. And then you take your spatula under the egg thingy and you flip it over and then you fold it over and then you let it cook so it's nice and crispy on both sides. And if I just do garlic, then I also do a half an avocado mashed up once it's done inside.
Taco.
Yeah, that's been my go-to most days.
I do have a follow-up question, specifically because different people, mostly because my fiance does not agree that there are multiple types of spatulas. So do you use a metal, plastic, or rubber spatula for
I
this?
use silicone exclusively.
So yeah, okay, cool.
First of all, it's actually not a spatula. If you're talking a culinary description, they're called turners. Spatulas are what you use to level out what's on your measuring cups, just so we're all clear. They're very,
okay.
They're two different utensils.
So a turner is like the soft kind of what you use to get stuff unstuck from the edges, like.
Oh, you know what? No, I think that is a spatula. You know what?
That's what my argument has been.
You knew I was wrong. You didn't say, no, you're wrong. You said, oh, so it's not this? That was so nice of you.
Okay,
Anyway.
it's the thing that looks like this.
Yeah, you're right. You're great. You got it.
Flip it over.
That looks like a
these two
keyboard.
together.
And
That wasn't that helpful.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It wasn't, but I don't want to bog down the episode.
It's all right. We can
Anyway,
cut.
So, Jeny, we are so grateful that you're here. We will be ranking that breakfast the next time Chandler and I meet for our next guest, so tune in for that to let us know, because we will both separately eat it. But this podcast is about storytelling, and you are one of our favorite storytellers. So, we've got some questions for you. Chandler?
Perfect.
Was like, let me dig into a snack.
I got a whole chicken nugget in my mouth.
Right at the top of the pod.
Yeah, we're gonna start off pretty simple. I mean, you kind of already gave us the initial. What we start off with was asking about your story. You gave us kind of an overview, so I think we'll just skip on to like the first immediate question. Unless you have more story. You have more story.
And
then I will.
Kind of ties into the other questions that you asked.
Well, then it's imperative then for your story that we dial it back a bit and dive in deeper. Jeny, I'm just going to let you take it away. Let's tell us about you. What is your story?
So I had a very religious upbringing, and I want to be really careful not to paint with a wide brush, and just very, very clear that I'm only sharing my experience, and I'm not saying anything about other people's lives or experiences. The way that I was brought up was in a deeply homophobic, heteronormative, misogynistic, racist, particular kind of part of Christianity. And I went to private school and I went to church, and so my friends in all parts of my life were part of this same very insular it worked. The teaching of all these things worked because I heard it from trusted adults in different places, from school to, youth group and Sunday mornings and all these things. And then once that, oh, you monster. Once that bubble popped, fucker. She's such a little bitch. Once that bubble kind of popped, and I met people who were gay and found out that I'm also kind of gay, made friends with people who weren't white, I realized, my God, oh no, I've caused a lot of harm in my early years, and it wasn't malicious, but intentions don't matter sometimes when harm has been caused, and in ways that I couldn't go back and make amends. So I think that what was the hardest about that was that there were so many ways in which my story was told for me. And my story was explained: when a girl does this, when this happens to a girl, then here's what that means, and here's what that says about her, and here's where her worth lies or doesn't. And so I think that has been really a motivation for me, both in telling stories and in kind of writing and creating and crafting stories, and which stories I pick to consume. So that's me.
Thank you, Jenny. I love the idea of becoming a storyteller because you didn't feel like yours was being told accurately in your upbringing. I'm trying. There's a famous author that it's the name is escaping me right now. So maybe by the time we do the intro, I'll remember. But there's a famous storyteller that says, like, if you are growing up and you're feeling like there are no stories that are being told about you, then tell the story. So I like the idea of, I didn't feel represented in my upbringing because I was constantly told I should be one thing when internally I may have been battling feeling I was something else. So I'm going to tell stories now because I don't want another little girl growing up thinking that she's got to be one way when she doesn't have to be. Right? That's really powerful. I love that.
Yeah, Adam said it. Thank you for, this is telling about what the rest of this interview is going to look like in a good way. And I'm going to thank you in advance for your vulnerability and honesty. I think Adam and we'll reflect after. I'm not going to pre-reflect.
Jenny's also very funny, so maybe that was the emotional moment, and it's all jokes from here on. I don't know.
The only way to figure it out is to keep listening to the end of the episode.
Question number 2, upcoming.
Wait, can we pause for 1 second?
Sure, of course. Yeah,
absolutely.
I've lost your tab. I have two. No. Oh no, here you are. Okay.
Question 2. We're not cutting that. We're an organic podcast. Question 2. Define what storytelling or a story means to you.
So I think, and this is possibly going to sound counterintuitive at first, but I think at its essence, and maybe not because you're both theater people also, but storytelling is about truth. And without that, it's not good storytelling, at least. So I consume almost exclusively fiction, and my favorites of that are usually like British murder mysteries and sci-fi and fantasy. And so I think that what makes a story go from a good story to a great story, from like a casual read to a more transcendent experience, is the kernels of truth in them. So like Lord of the Rings, which I think that everyone can agree is an epic tale. has and is kind of the standard for high fantasy, is one of the best series of stories that I've read because it contains so much truth in it. And the truth is not about whether or not there are orcs, but J.K. Chesterton has this quote. So Chesterton and Tolkien and C.S. Lewis all talked a lot about like this idea of the recovery of the senses through the reading of fairy stories. And it's this idea of like being able to re-see the world through the eyes of a child, like through your own childlike eyes. Like, we get bored by the things that we see every day. We don't notice that our front garden is beautiful because we see it every day that we leave and come home from work. And so their idea is that like these fantasy stories can kind of reinvigorate you to, he says something like, the beauty of reading about a golden apple is so that for one magical second you can remember that apples are red, and the majesty in that. So what am I saying about that? And I guess the truth of human frailty and human longing and devotion and duty and what makes us human in juxtaposition to great good and great evil, and how humans are capable of both. And I think it's just very powerful. Unlike, fucking Clive Cussler stories that are just about like, oh yes, I'm the handsomest man in the world and every woman is attracted to me and I never say a faux pas and I'm very tanned and handsome. Stories. That's because it's your real life, Adam.
I want to say two things. I'll say my quick thing and then I'll toss it to Chandler before I tell my other thing. But I do think it's interesting you name drop Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, knowing your religious upbringing and knowing the two of them are tied to stories.
They are.
Which is very interesting.
I thought about it a lot, but not to like brag or anything, but I actually studied C.S. Lewis at Oxford when I studied there very briefly. So
that is far more impressive than anything I've ever done. To be fair, though, Adam, there is a certain author that also writes fantasy work that has a religious upbringing, which I think very strongly. But we're not naming because we're not allowed to. And if you want to know why, check out our episode 0.
There is a guest, Jenny, that is the creme de la creme for us.
Our golden guest.
Name them until they agree to be on the show, though.
We'll name as far as remind you to tag this person at the end of the episode. That's at the end of the episode.
The quick thing I was going to say is that as an actor, because you said this when you're like, it's about telling the truth. The one time I got out of a speeding ticket was I was coming home from Pittsburgh, North Carolina at the time. This was a couple years ago when I was living there teaching. It was like 10, 11 a.m. because I left early in the day, right? I left overnight, 1, 2 a.m. And so I was just like, everybody's waking up and there's a quick, 70 miles per hour to 55 and half a mile zone. So I was going probably 65 and I got pulled over. He gave me the ticket. I was like, I've been up all night. I just want to go home. He goes, great. Here's the thing. My best friend's dad is a cop. And he said, I know that cop. Let me call him. And I showed up to court and the cop said, just let me do the talking. I'll get you out of this. And the judge said, I don't want to hear from the cop. I heard you're an actor. Are you lying to me? And I said, well, Your Honor, any good actor will tell you that good acting comes from finding the truth. And then he banged the gavel and said, get the heck out of here. So, you're right. Good storytelling is about finding the truth.
That or that judge is really fed up with actors.
Probably.
I do want to mention that as someone, you mentioned that you're one or two of your bigger passions in ingesting stories is sci-fi and fantasy, and I find it very, I hate using the word interesting. I'm drawn to the idea that you bring up looking for truth in or at least compare it to the fakeness or fantasy element is a reminder of the beauty of the real world. Because when I think of truth and fantasy, like I have a different, maybe a different perspective, or if you told me how do you find truth in fantasy, I'm going to give a completely different answer. And that's one of the beautiful reasons why this podcast is learning and growing and happening, is because different artists may see things very, very differently.
Hopefully they do, you know?
Well, clearly they do. Unless, maybe not.
Well, I also just like, and then I'll say this, and then we can toss it to Chandler for the next question, but like, there is a level of the reasons fantasy and sci-fi are so attractive to readers is because I think too often we think the world we're living in is like a cliche, and then being genuine seems to be a faux pas, where it's like, ew, I don't want to tell you my real feelings. Why would anybody do that? It's embarrassing. And when you read it in a fantasy or sci-fi, it's like, well, this is in a different world, so if they say how they're feeling, it's fine, right? It's almost like a shield to guard yourself against disappointment. Maybe that's just me.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I've frequently said that part of the reason I like reading fantasy is because so much of the world is fabricated. It lets you focus on the most relatable elements, and to me that is character, and strong character, and character growth, and kind of like overcoming problems as a person, which if you're a reader and you can't relate to the world around it, you can still relate more heavily to, oh, well, either there's this theme going on that's relevant in our world, or there's this character who's struggling with things that I've witnessed or that I experienced, and it makes it that much more prevalent to you.
And there's a guest that we'll one day have on our show that'll tell us all about that. But in the meantime,
I'm sure.
Chandler, next question.
Okay, so we talked about, we're always talking about story. You mentioned various authors, and we're kind of leaning in books here, but we're still going to open up whatever kind of story medium is relevant to you. We want to know, what's a story that you've ingested, also don't like that has provided an emotional response? What is a story that makes you feel?
What's wild is that I have actually eaten this book in its entirety. I've just chowed down on it.
That's impressive.
So, not the cover. That's bad for you.
We eat stories for breakfast, so you know.
Fitting right in.
This is the book that is the story that has provoked the most emotional response in me, I would say. And I have a tattoo for this book. And if it's okay, I want to tell you a little bit about, I want to read you a little section from this book, if that's okay.
For the audio listeners, the non-Patreon subscribers, it's easy to forget.
Thank you. This book is, of course, Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And it is, in essence, a story of her. She was a kind of darling of the Christian right, and wrote a book about her wonderful family and her life with her husband and their kids. And then she found out that he'd cheated on her repeatedly. And so then she wrote another book about, redemption and forgiveness and why she stayed with him and their family. And then she met Abby Wambach, the soccer player, and fell deeply in love with her. And she and her ex-husband are now co-parenting like a dream. And she and Abby are married. And it's kind of the story of her unlearning all of the things that she was taught to be a good Christian girl. And so a lot of it resonates with me on kind of trajectory of how I was brought up to be a good Christian girl and what a good Christian girl does or doesn't do or says or doesn't say. And so the beginning, the prologue is called Cheetah, and it's about a story of when she goes to the zoo with her wife and their daughters, and there's a thing called a cheetah run. So the zookeepers bring out a yellow lab. Yeah, sorry. I don't know. I hit a button on my... Son of a bitch. So the zookeepers bring out a yellow lab, and they say, "This is Yellow Lab, and this is our cheetah's best friend." Our cheetah was born in captivity and has grown up with this yellow lab as a puppy, and now they're best friends, and they do everything together. And so the yellow lab is going to do the cheetah run so that the cheetah knows what to do. And so there's a Jeep with a pink bunny tied to the back of it, and the Jeep takes off, and the Labrador takes off and runs after Bunny. And then when the Labrador gets the bunny, the Labrador then gets a treat. Okay, and now it's the cheetah's turn. And the cheetah does the same thing, and it chases down the bunny in like 2 seconds and gets it. Oh boy. And then the cheetah gets a steak. And so Glennon Doyle says, day after day, this wild animal chases dirty pink bunnies down the well-worn, narrow path they've cleared for her, never looking left or right, never catching that damn bunny, settling instead for a store-bought steak and the distracted approval of sweaty strangers. Obeying the zookeeper's every command, just like the lab she's been trained to believe she is, unaware that if she remembered her wildness just for a moment, she could tear those zookeepers to shreds. When Tabitha, the cheetah, finished her steak, the zookeeper opened a gate that led to a small field. Blah, 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 blah. There, in that field, away from the yellow lab and zookeepers, Tabitha's posture had changed. Her head was high, and she was stalking the periphery, tracing the boundaries of the fence created, back and forth, stopping only to stare somewhere beyond the fence. It was like she was remembering something. She looked regal and a little scary. I wished I could ask Tabitha, what's happening inside you right now? I knew what she'd tell me. She'd say, something's off about my life. I feel restless and frustrated. I have this hunch that everything was supposed to be more beautiful than this. I imagine fenceless, wide-open savannas. I want to run and hunt and kill. I want to sleep under an ink-black sky, silent sky, filled with stars. It's all so real I can taste it. Then she'd look back at the cage, the only home she's ever known. She'd look at the smiling zookeepers, the bored spectators, and her pantsing, bouncing, begging best friend, the lab. She'd sigh and say, I should be grateful. I have a good life here. It's crazy to long for what doesn't even exist. And I'd say, Tabitha, you are not crazy. You are a goddamn cheetah. And that has stuck with me since I read it, I don't know, whenever it came out. And now I read it at least once a year.
I think my favorite part of all that, because when you first said the name of the book, I looked it up while you were figuring out the sounding snafu. I was looking up the name, and I like to look at books online and see like what people like. I like to quick over 5-star reviews and 1-star reviews, and a lot of the 1-star reviews are people being like, "This person clearly doesn't understand what struggle's like," and that I think is a really good review of something like this because it proves how personal struggle in storytelling is, right? Like somebody might read her story and read things like that and think, well, I've gone through worse, or, well, you don't know how good you have it. But not enough people, in my perspective, look at it through that person's point of view. And so for her, what she went through in her upbringing and everybody around her telling her she had to be one thing when she felt like she wanted to be this other thing, when she felt like she wanted to be a cheetah, is different than anybody else's life, right? And like you resonate with that because you just told us a little bit about your story at the top of this episode about how it resonates with you, where you grew up in a culture that was like, you're a straight woman, this is how you're supposed to act. You can't act any other way. These are the expectations laid out for you, right? And you're like, well, I don't want to live in a zoo. I want to run. And you're told you're not allowed to have that feeling, let alone do it. And so I think it's fascinating how people sometimes will look at stories like that. Like I said, 1-star. Guys, if you're looking for like a laugh and a real like crazy existential crises, look up 1-star reviews on Goodreads books that you like, because they're crazy. They're crazy. But I think it's all like 1-star review. There's a comedian, I think it might be what's his name, that does Weekend Update. He talks about 1-star reviews being a reflection on yourself more than it is on the product. And so I look at those and I think of people who clearly have things in their own life with which they're struggling, and wish they had a story that helped them break through. And just because the one that helped you didn't work for them, they resent it. But I love that we all have a story that invokes that emotional response that helps us break through.
Yeah, that one little passage you read just makes me want to read the whole. I feel like that sums up. You clearly prepared some responses. That's like, and very appreciative, because that's such a. For those who don't quite realize, that is a very applicable metaphor in the cheetah. Just something so strong. I'm like, wow, you planned this. Just it works.
Fun fact: Jenny's first character at the table that I DM was a Tabaxi, which is a
that's
feline type character.
Was that on purpose?
I don't know. Maybe it may have been subconscious.
Not like
it's okay.
Maybe subliminally.
The character she is now is I don't want to say more interesting, but is a lot of. I can tell that Jenny finds them more interesting. All right. I think I'm question 4, so I'll just go to question 4. Next question is: what is the story that you find yourself referencing a lot? This is purposely open-ended because Chandler and I had very different responses to this question.
I had to pick a third option. I think my first 2 options were pre-used answers, and so I had to find a different story to reference.
So I think that it was really hard for me to come up with one story. Can I give 2?
Yeah, always.
Okay. So I might cry here, but it's fine. One of the stories that I reference a lot is from the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series, which are children's books, and also by C.S. Lewis. But the last book in the 7-book series is, I mean, the whole thing is an allegory. And Lewis always said it wasn't, but like, stop lying to yourself, my dude. Like, it's like a 1-to-1 rate. Like, it's, I don't do math. I don't know what a 1-to-1 ratio is, but I'm assuming that would be a 1-to-1 ratio of an allegory. Okay, so like the last book is called The Last Battle, and it's basically like the end of the world. And in this world that Lewis has created, there's all these talking animal people from Narnia, and there's all these talking like white people from the Thunderland, and there's all these I don't know why I'm saying talking for people, because we know that most people do that. Talking Middle Eastern people from this third land, and in the end, there's like this fake godlike creature, and then in the very end, everybody dies, spoiler, and they all go on to heaven, and that's where this Middle Eastern guy, who is essentially Muslim, goes to like Jesus heaven, or not really, well, I guess, I don't know, heaven, whatever. And he spent his whole life in worship of what would essentially be Allah, and he's like, okay, so why am I here? And this is the thing that I reference, which is that the godlike creature in this book series says to him that your life you spent searching for truth, and every prayer that you said to this other god, every act of devotion, it was all done in service of me, because I am truth. And every time you search for truth, you are searching for me. And that is the level of Christianity that I can get down with. That idea of truth in fiction, and truth in action, and truth in things like that. So that one I reference. I don't know why I'm talking about religion so much. This was not really my intention. Yeah. And then the other one is The Great Gatsby, which is one of my favorite fucking books. And I love the Lost Generation. I love the kind of how all these different authors grappled with a new world after World War I, and how trauma changes folks' lens. And the writing is so beautiful. And all of the characters are so flawed, but in a way that makes you hope that they're redeemable. And the layers and layers in that novel made it the one reason that I fought to teach 11th grade every year, so I could do American Lit, so I could teach Gatsby. So those are probably my two.
What's your favorite version of The Great Gatsby film?
Baz Luhrmann, for sure. I think it is the only one that really nails the...
I think I liked Leo's interpretation a lot.
That is Baz Luhrmann, right?
Oh, wait, I thought I mixed it up. Never mind. You're wrong. I'm just kidding.
Okay, that's fair.
I love Leo as Gatsby.
Me too.
I'm just deflecting from your beautiful answer of every time you were searching for truth. That was me.
Yeah, I'm sorry this got kind of religious. That was not...
Hey, it happens. To not let yourself speak religiously would be to not let yourself tell your truth, which would be against everything that we're trying to do on this podcast with sharing your story.
And also, we're just like, we are a product of our upbringing, right? Like, the way we tell stories and absorb them are a product of how we were told stories and what our story is. So, like, you inadvertently are drawn to the things that are like your upbringing. And I like to believe that some people absorb authors like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien incorrectly. Like, they absorb them as allegories of the Bible and biblical stories, which they are. However, they transcend what I think sometimes the public perception of religion is, as sort of a othering of people, when it should be more of a welcoming of literally everybody. And so the reason why people like us, who are big storytellers and very like, hey, we try to love everybody, are drawn to those for the right reasons, right? I think of like, I have a tattoo of Harry Potter on my like forearm, right? And I think of how problematic that author has become and her recent history. But like, I think of how could somebody who wrote like a really inclusive work of art not get it? And it's because they were brought up in a different way and they're telling the wrong version of the story, right? So
also, it's kind of a testament to when you're like, art and story is just as much a product of the audience as it is the storyteller.
Yes, that's a good point.
And so you have this...
I think we alluded to that a little bit in episode 0, where I said, like, as an actor or a director, you're taught that, like, theater is 3-pronged because it's performer, it's production, but it's also audience, right? Like, you don't get live theater without that third part. You don't get art sometimes without that third part, right? So it is about the people absorb it. That's a good point, Chandler.
So that kind of leads us into, like, what makes a good story, you know? I don't really have a good transition, so I'm just hard cutting to the next question. I thought I had something.
The best transition is a hard cut.
Yeah, so we're just gonna sweep right along, move past the emotions, and maybe into more emotions. Maybe different, maybe the same. Just keep listening, and you'll find out.
What do you believe makes a good story? Authenticity, and I think that all of the books that I love reflect that authenticity, and either the authenticity of the author or the authenticity of the characters. I think that all of the books that I've talked about have, what kind of draws me to them is, yes, they're a good story in that it's compelling and it's interesting and it keeps you wanting to continue to find out the ending. But it also feel like I care about the outcome of the characters in these stories, and I think without an author who doesn't have a good feel for human experience isn't going to be able to get that across in a story. And it doesn't mean that an author has to experience all the things, but whatever it is that they're writing about, like people always say, write what you know. And that is true for fantasy and science fiction as it is for a memoir, in my opinion.
It's so funny. I feel like we keep pausing, but it's just because we're Just trying to absorb the gravity of some of the things that you say.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize.
So
No,
good.
What you're saying
someone named Hank is really good. If you have to have someone named Hank.
Hank's great.
I don't think I've ever read a story where there's a Hank, so I guess
Hank
there's...
Green.
Yeah.
Hank Green's a good author. So I obviously we're reeling because you're wonderful. So let's go to the bonus question that we didn't send you. I'm just kidding. I sent you this question. I don't know if I was supposed to or not, but I sent it to you. So
there's also one more before the last.
there is. So wait, we're on question 6, right?
Versed in.
You just asked what makes a good story, right?
Yeah, so there's 2 questions left. One more question and then a recap question.
I got you. So the next question is, which format of storytelling are you most well versed in? That's the next question.
I would say novels and fiction. My ideal vacation, maybe not every year, but my, like, how do I put this? My ideal vacation to be not the only thing I ever do, but if I were to have, be just, wonderfully wealthy and I could just do whatever I wanted all the time, then every year I would go to the beach with a house with a private pool, and anyone can come. It doesn't matter. And then as many books as there are days that I'm going to be there, and I would just sit by the pool and read all of those books. And
I feel like I could probably do a book a day if it was all I did that day. But
it's on the book. But we'll be there. We'll be there. So anyone's welcome.
Part of this question is, what are avenues of storytelling that you're maybe less exposed to, but you're very interested in?
I'm really interested in spoken word poetry.
Oh, okay.
And I feel a little bit like I don't belong in that venue.
Well, belong's probably the wrong word.
Yeah.
Are you a Shakespeare fan, Jeny?
Here's the thing. I love the tragedies, because they're the funniest. So from a audience member point of view, yes. From a should we teach it in school?
So you're telling me that you don't like Much Ado About Nothing.
Okay. Much Ado is obviously my favorite comedy. Beatrice is a role that I've always wanted to play.
Well, coming soon, Jeny and Adam as Beatrice and Benedict. And
coming soon, we eat stories for breakfast, puts on an audio play, Much Ado About Nothing.
I have also never wanted to play a role more than Benedict from Much Ado. But anyway.
That and Desdemona. I mean, she has death scene. I mean, it just goes on and on. I mean, what actor wants anything more than a long death scene?
Well, I mean, I guess in Midsummer's Night, Puck also has an incredibly long death scene. Fake, but it happens.
Yeah, yes.
No, it's not Puck, it's Bottom, but it does happen.
It does go on, but it's...
Anyway, that was the last question. If there wasn't a bonus question, then I totally spoiled there was a bonus question. Go ahead, Chandler.
Question. So... At the very beginning, our very first question was to tell us your story. Our bonus question is, after kind of deep diving a little bit more into story, the way, like what story means to you, stories that have had an impact on you, the bonus question is, if you could tell your story in the most ideal way possible, with the exception of it can't be on our podcast because clearly we're already here. How would you choose to tell your story? Through what medium? What would be your approach? Like, how would you have your story told?
I didn't get into all of the reasons that I left the church, but some of them had to do with some capital T trauma. And some of the ways that I kind of worked through that was writing it out. So I've written the book about the stuff and things, and it's more therapy than it is novel. Like it's probably 4 times longer than it should be for, like, were it to be on my radar to get it published. But So that is one answer. The other answer is that I would want Maggie Gyllenhaal. Gyllenhaal? I don't know. Gyllenhaal to play me in the Lifetime made-for-TV movie of my life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I actually don't watch Lifetime, so I probably wouldn't catch that movie when it came out. But
Jeny,
that's what I'd want it to
that is
be
the
on.
most Jeny response ever. I want Maggie Gyllenhaal to play me in a Lifetime movie. I probably won't watch it, but that's what I would want.
Sounds I'd probably.
For context, I think Chandler said like an orchestral piece, right? Like a symphony.
I think so, yeah, like a soundtrack but without the film.
Without the film, and I said a dance piece that also had an orchestra piece.
However, it was we were kind of not allowed to say stage play or filmed because we could, but
when we were talking about it, we were talking about like our sort of wheelhouse, and he was saying film and I was saying stage, and so we challenged each other to pick something that it wouldn't be. But I do think even if I could choose theater, it would be a dance piece,
which is still theater in a way.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Well,
okay,
Jeny,
can I change my answer?
Please go ahead.
I think I would like a gaggle of 9-year-olds to do it as a sock puppet. Just all of the trauma included. Like, very dark.
I was so ready to just your second idea and be like, okay, Maggie Gyllenhaal, but there's no way. Yeah. It's got to be that.
Yeah, that's the way to go. Yeah.
With so much trauma for the... I mean, it could be therapeutic for those 9-year-olds if you intentionally pick the right 9-year-olds.
Yeah. Trauma's most easily...
I don't know. I said a gaggle, and I think that denotes, like, just the first 8 9-year-olds you find. You get them in a room.
I love it. That would be so chaotic.
It's a whole other podcast.
I'm not good with them. Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very wonderful. Well, that concludes the questions that we have.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We appreciate it. No, of course. Thank you. We had conversations about our first guest, and we came down to a couple, but we both only unanimously agreed on you as our first guest. So we're very happy that you joined us.
Don't get too excited. We mostly agreed on you because you're just awesome. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no other reason.
No other reason. I'll take it.
Yeah. So Jeny, we'd love to give you a quick chance to, like, if there's anything you want to tell people to check out, be it a story that you didn't get to mention, like, hey, check out this piece of art, or like you want to leave your socials or something that you do that you want to plug. I want to give you a chance to go ahead and do that before the end.
Or if you just have a message that you want to share with people, one final note.
Okay, so this podcast is being recorded at the end of August. So, since I'm only a year and a half out from no longer being in the classroom, what I would say is that for those who are returning to the classroom as students or as foolish educators, I would say you've got this. You're going to be amazing. And your worth is not determined by any grade you receive. This too shall pass. The good. Oh! I heard Tom Hanks talk about this. That the best advice he ever got was
actors on actors.
Yes,
it's a good episode.
Was this too shall pass. So when things are really bad, this too shall pass. But when you're making millions of dollars and everybody adores you, this too will pass. So there you go.
You can tell she really believes that the first part about you're not defined by your grades, because she's posted it in 3 different chats in our group the last week. So
I really believe it really strongly. The number of kiddos that I've had crying in my classroom over the years over a grade, it's like,
Jeny, we really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining and being the best first guest.
You're just saying that. Thanks.
Out of all the first guests we've had, you're the best.
Oh my God,
you are the best. And technically, we were each other's first guest, so that is kind of saying something.
Well, I didn't consider it that way, so I want to take it back and reevaluate. I'll let you know later.
I still think you're better than my first guest. No offense, Adam. It's close. It was close.
I would say I'm probably in the top 3 of
easily.
first guests.
It's bold,
easily,
but probably accurate.
I am most excited to try your preferred breakfast.
I am actually very excited to do that before our next episode. So
I might send you a message with like what the way to do it is.
Oh, do it, yes, please.
Because
this is not a joke. We will, at the top of every episode, we will have already eaten our previous guests' preferred, and we will rank them all. We will keep a running ranking of every, like, we're going to rate them all on a scale of 1 to 10. So
I may even film it.
How much
maybe
would I need to send you? And what kind of bribes do you take for me to be in first place forever?
We'll talk about that after we're done recording. Yeah, so yeah,
My
we'll
God, we're
up
still
here.
recording. How embarrassing.
All right,
Jeny. Yeah, so for context for people, because we didn't actually talk about it, Jenny is at the table that I DM, and she is just like a really open and free character and storyteller in that, and I love that about her. And I've also played at her table as an NPC before, so like getting to see her as sort of the arbiter of the story is really beautiful, and like also to hear her talk about how that's not a part of how she defines herself is really interesting, because like I always look at people who are storytellers as they define themselves by their best skill. And so to have seen her do something at a highly skilled level and not mention it a lot in this conversation was pretty impressive to me, because it's her, not without realizing it, subconsciously not even relying on that part of her, which is a huge, impressive part of who she is.
For me, I don't think I've actually experienced her at a D&D table, so I don't know that I've seen her in that sphere, but we did serve on the leadership team for our Dungeons & Dragons community, for Inspired R&R, briefly, and my context of Jeny, which has not been changed at all, is that she is this caring, selfless, intentional, and kind human being, and for me, it was very engaging, I guess, or I was really excited to get to talk with her in a format where we were talking about her, because I knew she was a teacher. I knew that she had maybe a little bit of a traumatic past. I didn't know much about it. I just knew how much she cared about and still cares about the community that she still serves for.
And again, I meant what I said, just to reiterate, like I love the idea of I became somebody who tells stories because I didn't feel like mine was being told. I will come back to that over and over again. And I think that to sort of lead into our part of what will you take with you from this episode is I will take with me the stories that are still brewing in my head. Like I've been trying to write a fantasy novel for years now. I'm also written a lot of one-act plays and stuff, right? And I've been working on one. I will take with me that I do have stories in me, in my head and my heart, that I believe haven't been told yet. And that will ignite my fire to say, hey, you have some free time right now. You can start working on these stories more, because there are stories that have not yet been told that somebody out there is waiting to be told.
I think, I second that, but not to beat the same drum. I think for me, my takeaway, like last week, the takeaway was, you talked about one of your favorite films. I can't remember if you said of all time or just one of the most emotionally evocative films for you was Inside Out. I haven't gotten to Inside Out 2 yet, but I did put in an effort to watch it again. And from an adult perspective, understanding and looking at it, I can't say that it's a movie I don't like. I think I used to say like I wasn't a big fan of it, but now it's like after watching it from a different view, very much so, that is one of the first films I want to show my future children when they're old enough to comprehend, because I think it's so vitally important. There's so much truth. And I forgot the whole motif and balance and message of like, happiness is great, but all of the emotions are important. You feel them all for a reason, and it's okay to feel all of them. In fact, it's vital that you feel all of them.
But I just forever have a vision of that joyful memory being combined with the sad one at the same time.
Yeah, I was
crying and being held.
I was crying.
It is so simple and powerful at the same time, and those are my favorite types of stories.
And I won't even go into talking about how much of a hero Bing Bong is, and that he's the hero that...
Oh, no.
I used to make me sad, and it still is sad, but I look at him as one of the strongest. Like, he is in the most Batman-like sense. He is the hero Gotham needs but doesn't deserve. He's 70% cotton candy, and we need that.
And if we want to get super highbrow about it, there are parts of you that unfortunately do need to die and fade in order for you to grow up. And I don't even mean that in the sense of like, grow up and be an adult now. You're not allowed to play with Pokemon. Sorry, I'll always play Pokemon. But like, there are parts of yourself, your adolescent self, that do have to fade in order for you to become an adult. And the part of you that thinks fake people next to you are real, unfortunately, does have to fade a little bit for you to become an adult, right?
Yeah.
And oh yeah, it's so good.
But I guess to mention the takeaway for this week with Jeny for me is she mentioned one very strong story that I feel like is important for me to read to help better understand her and her story. And not even for, I don't know that that's something I need to read for me, but like for me to understand me, but for me to understand her. And honestly, I grew up in a similar environment. I have a completely different perspective because I had a lot of encouragement and what's like support system, and I grew up in a very loving version of a similar environment to she did. But I may know people with similar experiences to Jeny, and I think to be able to understand those, I think would be very
and also
profound.
To piggyback off that, understanding POV of a story impacts what that story is, right? Like, as men who identify as straight and white, like, our point of view from that upbringing is inherently different from someone like Jeny who just, identified as a woman and queer, right? Like, that it's got to be so different than growing up in a group of people that tell you that you, the straight white man, are the leader and the powerful one, right? Like, those are two totally different upbringings, regardless if they're loving or not, right? So all of that together just sort of forms this whole dichotomy that, that part isn't talked enough about, I don't think. So for sure, that's also a book that I added to my list.
Man, podcast as a whole, I almost said this after the first question. Yeah. I feel like we came into this thinking this is going to be a fun, artful podcast full of like interesting, and immediately we were just proven why this is such a beautiful concept, because episode 1, we invite someone who has a very fun personality, and this entire episode was a deep moment.
So next guest, no more deep moments. Oh, I forgot to do it. That's how deep it was. I forgot to do it. So next guest, stand-up comedian. They're going to say I make jokes because I'm sad all the time.
That's what's going to happen. Well, hey, if it ends up being a lot of people's stories that they want to share are dark, then that's what.
Well, thanks for listening to We Eat Stories for Breakfast, friends. We appreciate it.
We'll actually have breakfast tried by next time.
Yeah, next time we will rate and keep a running rankings of all of our guests' breakfast. I'm very excited for this one. Make sure you check out our social media. I don't know if it's up yet, but if it is, it's probably We Eat Stories for Breakfast, some sort of version.
Yeah, somewhere.
It'll be posted somewhere. And make sure you tag.
Well, also, Chet, who knows if we have a Patreon yet, but if you want to see...
Sure.
It is easy to forget being on a podcast. So there's a couple tattoos you can see, or a couple moments where you could realize Jeny was cursing in her first question because her cat was being kind of inconvenient. She never mentioned a cat, so just for context, cat. So if that's up, great.
Here. Oh, I just blocked the camera. My cat is right there on my bed. She's chilling. So thank you for joining our Patreon. You can see my cat, Colette.
Okay, well, if we're sharing cats, one of mine is messing with my backpack over there. He's just hanging out. But yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to tag Brandon Sanderson.
Did we have a sound off last time? I don't remember.
Time for lunch?
That's right. Time for lunch. Bye, guys.
See ya.